Welcome back, everybody. This is a three-part series where we're looking at the challenges putting together an integrated turf management strategy. So in the first episode, we looked at the host, the environment, and the pathogen. And then we looked at integrated strategies in the second episode. And this, the third and final installment of this mini-series, we are going to look at how we use fungicides in our integrated strategy and how we get the very best out of them. I'm Glenn Kirby, the technical manager from Syngenta.
And I'm Henry Bechley from ICL. Okay, Glenn, so far in this mini series, as you put it, we've covered our causal pathogen, Microdochium navale, and we've discussed the ways in which we can try to create less conducive conditions for its development, to try and slow it down really as part of our integrated disease management plan. But if we're going to manage the disease completely through those really long periods of disease pressure that we experience during the autumn and winter, then we are going to need to think about the use of fungicides, which are a central part of any autumn ITM plan. And I suppose, Glenn, the key questions I would ask you are, when should we start our preventative program and what active ingredients should we use?
It's a good question, Henry, and I'm pleased to say we've got some new technology for the Irish market. We have Acernity available now, which is a dual systemic fungicide that we can use in Ireland on golf. It is there in a 3 litre pack, 3 litres a hectare. You get 2 applications of it a year, and it's got solatenol and difenoconazole in there. Now, of course, on top of that, we also have Strata Elite, which you'll always all be familiar with, and Medallion for the colder periods of the year.
Yeah, you did some interesting work on these products, didn't you? Used in sort of conjunction with each other or in succession a couple of years ago at the ISTE, didn't you? Over with Mark Sheridan. How did that work out?
Yeah, we did some nice work with Mark over there in Dublin. It was excellent. So what we did is we started the trial off with Acernity. So we applied that around the 22nd of September. Now, we would have gone into Greencast, we would have looked at historical data, we would have looked at when disease kicked off, and we would have tried to get slightly ahead of it. Now, we didn't get that perfect in this situation. You can see we were between 1% and 2% disease on these at the beginning. Now, and what we did in that trial, we then applied roughly a calendar month later, which isn't our best practice advice, but it's a useful way of testing these fungicides to their limit to see what we can achieve. So the second application in Strata Elite went on around the 22nd of October, 1 month after the first one. And then we followed that up with Medallion 1 month later again. So that went on around the 20th of November. And what you can see there, the lighter green line, that is the untreated control. And we got really good control through that whole period. Fairly low disease pressure at the beginning of the year. But once we got through that, the untreated control flew and it flew and it flew. Now, Mark is particularly fastidious on his disease marking, isn't he, Henry? So kind of 2% disease with Mark is a pretty frightening amount of disease. Now, once you get up to the kind of 12% that we got at the end, that is not a nice place to be, is it?
No, he really does his job properly there.
He really does like counting disease, does Mark. So the combination of Acernity and Strata Elite and Medallion did a really nice job for us. But the most pleasing thing about this trial for me is that bottom line. That is the Acernity and Strata Elite Medallion in succession. And what we did is we managed to zero that disease population out, Henry, because if you look further down the line, when that disease pressure ramps up through December, January, February, we haven't applied any more fungicides after that Medallion, and we did a great job of zeroing it out. Now, I'm not suggesting it's going to work like that in every situation, but in that particular trial, in that Irish climate that we've already looked at is particularly challenging, and you can get this disease fly away in untreated areas. we got some really nice control with that structure. And we got some nice images there because we had some rider in there as well, which was really good and added some colour. And you can see the untreated there against the Acernity and Strata Elite and Medallion, all with 1 litre of rider in there, which just lifted the colour. You can also see here in the free spray program how that additional colour masked a little bit of disease we had in there. It gave us a bit more stress relief on the grass, so we got a bit better control out of the fungicides as well. And I suspect we had a bit of UV protection against that fungicide as well, so maybe got a little bit of extra longevity out of it. So considering that the final application was the 22nd of November, these images were taken on the 15th of February, Henry, 12 weeks after the last application. So we were really, really pleased.
Yeah, I remember going to see those trial plots at the time, and I was just knocked out by them. And you know I love rider anyway, Glenn. They were really standout plots.
Yeah, and you can see some of those kind of plots in the middle with the AIM program that we've snappily named it. So that's Acernity, Strata, Elite, Medallion, and you can see rider at 1 litre gave us a really nice uplift in what we got, so well worth it. So Acernity, Strata Elite, and then Medallion, a really nice program to base the beginning of your fungicide strategy around at the beginning of that disease season.
Yeah, those results were really, really impressive, weren't they? Just 3 applications during a really high risk period, and then what is it, like 4 or 5 months afterwards, those treated areas are still clean, whereas the untreated areas are just kind of wiped out. Amazing. And it just shows you really that just how good these technologies are. And actually with those, you mentioned it, Glenn, they weren't even timed in a way that we would recommend. They were just timed, to fulfill an experimental protocol, weren't they? What advice could you give us on timing, Glenn, to really get it right? Because they do need to be applied correctly, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Look, using a fungicide early on in the disease's life cycle gives us a much cleaner slate to work with. And that was a perfect example, that trial of that, where we got things under control early and then we could relax later on in the year. Look, put a plan together using Greencast. We've touched on that before. Look at your historic data. Look at your historic records as well. Look at your spray sheets from the past and look when you went. And did that give you good control? And that's probably the right kind of time of year to be very focused and alert. Or if it didn't quite give you enough, then maybe you want to be thinking a little bit before that and just get ahead of the game. Try those fuzz bags we spoke about. Get some indicator green plugs in the bag and look if you're not totally sure. That will give you an indication of when to go. And let's not underestimate the value of some great observation from your team looking for those indicator greens. All helps you get your timing right. If people are out there looking for it, we don't want to let this get away from us. But as we know, we need a plan, and even the best laid plans never really always come off, because we know the weather rarely does what we hope it's going to do. So even if you've got a plan, create a backup plan as well.
Yes, absolutely. So look, Glenn, the trial work that we sort of saw there was kind of 3 fungicides, and it did really, really well, didn't it? But quite often, commonly, more fungicides are being used, I suppose, because the pressure is heightened, under the pressure of play and in the real world of what it's like, as a real working golf green. How do we think about the sequencing of multiple fungicide applications through the autumn?
Well, I think the key thing with Ireland here, Henry, is we know we're going to be under some serious disease pressure for some pretty long periods at a time. So we can plan this out. We can map out our fungicide strategy. And when we're doing that, I like to start at Christmas and work backwards. I always feel if we get through to that Christmas period clean, January, February, March isn't too challenging. Whereas if we go into that period in a bit of a state, January, February, March is just really stressful and hard work. So I like to start at Christmas and work backwards. After all, we also like to give ourselves a bit of a break over the Christmas period and forget about our greens for at least a few hours whilst we're enjoying the turkey. when we're looking at that period, we need to be thinking about our gaps between those applications. And it's a bit like Primo, this one for me. We really shouldn't be looking at calendar months. Products just don't break down over a 4-week period all the way through the year. They break down in different speeds at different times of the year. The warmer it is, the shorter the period those products are going to last. Now, it's not quite GDD, it's more complex than with Primo because we're dealing with multiple active ingredients. They all work slightly differently. But if you did want to try growth degree days, as it's something that's kind of works quite well with Primo and a lot of people are used to it, then I would kind of try 170 growth degree days at a base temperature of 0. Now, what that's really doing is it's giving you about 2 weeks of longevity in the September period, stretching out to about 4 weeks in December, roughly. Now, if you work that back, it can work out a lot of fungicides. As the earlier you start, the more of those kind of 2-weekers around September and early October you're going to have to apply, and they soon mount up. So the more we can delay that start, the less fungicides we're going to have to use. But some areas of the country, particularly in Ireland, you're going to have much cooler climates with high leaf moisture, and you're going to just have to start early. And the west coast of Ireland is a really good example of that. Now, don't take this wrong. What I'm not saying here is we need to apply fungicides every 2 weeks through that period. What I'm saying is that's how long a period you're going to have fungicide cover for. So if you get to the end of that 2-week period at the end of September, and the weather conditions are conducive to disease, then you can get another one on. But if you've come through that period of protection and the weather has broken in your favor and we've got low leaf moisture and the temperature is much better, then you can back off. But you back off knowing your fungicide is no longer giving you the coverage that it started with.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful, that is, Glenn. And of course, that's the reason why we have our integrated strategies in place in the background, because they're all aiming at slowing down a redevelopment to sort of, just give you that bit of breathing space. If you feel like you've got no cover, but the conditions aren't absolutely ideal, that turf nutrition, moisture management, the use of turf harness can really help you kind of until you need to go again. And that's really what it's about in a nutshell, isn't it? So look, I think I'm always knocked out when we look at the trial data. We know that the fungicide technologies are terrific, but they aren't idiot proof, are they, Glenn? You still have to apply them correctly if you're going to get the best out of them. So how do we apply our fungicides to get the very best results? Because it does make a real difference, and it could be the difference between success and failure, couldn't it?
All of the products I'm talking about here in this period need to go onto the leaf, Henry, through this autumn period for Microdochium. We want to get them onto the leaf, maybe a little bit onto the crown so they're systemically taken up. So my best practice advice through this period of the year for this challenge is 350 to 400 litres of water. Use red nozzles. The Syngenta XC nozzles are excellent for this. And keep your pressure between 2 and 3 bar. Now, there's a reason for that. If we drop below 2 bar, we lose our coverage that way. If we go too much above 3 bar, then we get this fan opening up and we start losing things through drift, which isn't good for the environment, and it's not getting the product where we want it. So 2 to 3 bar on pressure, very important. And make sure those booms float nicely as well, because if you've got booms, they want to be parallel to the surface of the green. And as we know, greens are rarely flat. So you want to make sure they float over the undulations so we get good even coverage all across those greens. Very important.
Yeah, really important. Well, vitally important, because, with this disease being so damaging, and the damage potentially being so long lasting, especially when the risk is so high for so long, we do need to be fully integrated in our strategies and take that belt and braces approach, with background, good cultural ITM practice, but also fungicides as well, because our non-plant protection products, they only help to slow down the rate of development of the disease at best, which is really important. but it's the fungicides that actually kill it or zero it out, you know, to allow us to start afresh, really. You know, it's a reset button when it's carried out properly, rather than, you know, chasing our tails or fighting that losing game, you know, for months on end, if we just, you know, if we, you know, lose a grip of the situation. Okay, so look, very good, Glenn. So in summary, I think we, you know, all we need to do is think of everything when it comes to Microdochium patch disease control. Simple as that, everyone. Firstly, we need to keep an eye on those climatic factors that drive the development of the disease. And maybe, you know, I mean, obviously any kind of forecasting would help in this, but, you know, greencast might sort of help with our thinking as well. We need to take into account our own individual site situations and maybe shift the management emphasis into the areas that reduce the likelihood of attack, especially reducing that kind of period of leaf wetness. We also need to maintain turf health with the use of specific fertilizers designed for use at this time, you know, slow release early, more conventional a bit later on, with a bit of iron in with those later ones. You know, and if renovations are occurring, which, you know, generally they need to be as sympathetic as possible without losing sight of the agronomic objective. And maybe we do need to factor a preventative fungicide in around those if the risk factors are starting to build, or there's other extenuating circumstances, which there really is in Ireland. We haven't even mentioned this yet, you know, with the sort of use of irrigation water with a high lime content. That can really ramp up the disease risk, and certainly should be factored in to the equation if we have a sort of dry late summer where there's lots of, you know, irrigation water being applied that's got quite a high lime content. Then, you know, that really does increase our focus on the need for maybe preventative fungicide starting earlier. But our background maintenance, that needs to be focused on Microdochium patch disease at all times from now on, really. But when we do start our fungicide programs, it needs to be preventative, it needs to be carefully sequenced, it needs to be applied correctly and at the right time. As I said, Glenn, we just need to be thinking about everything, but it's not rocket science. You know, we can do this. Have you got anything to add, Glenn?
Yeah, I just echo those statements, Henry. Be ultra conscious of your renovation week and how much work you're trying to do, and just be ready if it goes wet or the weather conditions change on you, because that can be a starting point for a very long journey if you get it wrong through that period. Yeah. Understand your risk factors and understand your climate, and put a plan in place to deal with that risk. Don't be afraid to modify it, change it, look at it, but put a plan in place. Take the time to write it down. Look, there's loads of technologies, both fungicide and from this ICL portfolio, to build a really good integrated strategy here. And there's loads of help as well. If you want our help, give us a shout. Make sure you put that right technology on the shelf, ready to go, because when the weather breaks in favor of Microdochium patch, we want to be in charge of the situation. And we know that is highly likely. The odds of it happening are stacked in Microdochium's favor in Ireland. Acernity, Instraterally, Medallion, really good fungicide strategy for this period of the year. Aim, get yourself ready, because when it's ready to go, you want to be armed and ready to aim.
Very good, Glenn.
You like that, do you?
Very good.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully you got something out of these, and I've enjoyed putting them together.